Welcome back to our channel where we provide updates and undisclosed narratives on the royal family. We provide you with the exciting news breaking King Charles's decree cuts Camilla's family. From royal orbit, King Charles III has reportedly issued a formal decree that terminates any official connection between members of Queen Camilla's family and the monarchy's line of succession, as well as the associated privileges typically linked to informal ties with the crown. This development has a significant impact on both the institutional framework and personal dynamics of the British monarchy. The instrument was reportedly finalized at a clandestine meeting at Buckingham Palace, which is believed to have been a unilateral conclusive endeavor to establish the lineage of the House of Windsor. The contemporary monarchy is particularly susceptible to the reported narrative due to its location at the intersection of personal allegiance, public representation, and constitutional doctrine, which has garnered significant attention. The signing was witnessed by a restricted exclusive group of senior royals, including the Princess Royal Princess Anne and the Prince of Wales Prince William, according to individuals who are well-versed in the royal household's operations. The trio's presence is significant in both symbolism and operation. Anne is renowned for her meticulousness and stewardship of the family's private interests. William, as the heir apparent and father to the next generation, embodies the immediate continuity of succession, and the king as sovereign possesses ultimate authority over the conferral of titles and ceremonial roles. The decree's practical effect is to officially exclude Queen Camilla's children, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes, and their descendants from any current or future ceremonial, representational, or hierarchical positions associated with the monarchy. The decree's language is believed to clarify the status of Parker Bowles and Lopes and eliminate any potential avenues for their integration into the official duties, privileges, or public roles traditionally associated with the crown, despite the fact that they are not included in the constitutional line of succession by birthright. Palace insiders have described the immediate consequences of the king's alleged conduct as precipitous and severe. According to reports, Queen Camilla was not informed in advance of the signature of the contract. She was observed departing the palace in a state of extreme distress immediately following the meeting. This narrative illustrates a situation in which emotional disconnection and institutional adjustment are present. The episode is said to have precipitated a crisis of loyalty among certain long-serving palace staff. According to unverified reports, several aides who have served the king and queen for many years are believed to have submitted resignations in protest, further exacerbating the turmoil within the household. The nature of those departures, whether as a direct consequence of the decision or a response to its implementation, is a subject of significant debate. Nevertheless, both interpretations underscore the profound impact that human actions at the institution's zenith have on the organization that supports it. Buckingham Palace has been conspicuously mute, refraining from speaking and releasing no official statement. This has exacerbated conjecture on a national and international scale. However, in an era of constant media scrutiny and social media amplification, silence itself becomes a communicative act. Official reticence is a common practice in regal matters until specific terms are established and communication is finalized. The public, royal critics, and journalists have been compelled to develop their own hypotheses regarding the motivations behind this significant and highly personal royal action due to the lack of confirmatory evidence. The primary question that these observers have consistently raised is both straightforward and significant. What was the reason for the precipitous official exclusion of the Queen's family, and why at this particular moment? According to individuals who are acquainted with the palace's internal dynamics, the explanation cannot be reduced to a single event. Rather, they argue that it is rooted in a complex, lengthy narrative that is influenced by the legacy, loyalty, institutional development, and the enduring public impact of the late Princess Diana. It is imperative to analyze the intricate personal and public history that has influenced the majority of the king's mature life in order to comprehend the importance of his stated decision. For many years, the relationship between the former Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles was the subject of protracted public scrutiny and moral condemnation, particularly following the dissolution of his marriage to Princess Diana. Camilla was primarily perceived as the intruder in a familial catastrophe in the collective consciousness, a perception that was firmly established following Diana's premature death in 1997 and has continued to influence public perceptions for decades. Later endeavors to reconcile and reintegrate into public life for Camilla and her associates have been impeded by the enduring impact of that era. Following Camilla and Charles's civil wedding in 2005, the monarchy initiated a strategic and systematic initiative to restore Camilla's public image. The process was both personal and institutional, necessitating time, meticulously orchestrated appearances, and a consistent narrative that redefined Camilla as a devoted supporter and loyal partner of Charles, rather than a rival agent. Camilla's marriage to the former Prince of Wales was both a personal reconciliation and an institutional challenge. The union encountered a populace that was still emotionally attached to Diana's memory and suspicious of Camilla's perceived involvement in previous incident. The palace implemented a deliberate rehabilitation strategy. Camilla was initially appointed as the Duchess of Cornwall and subsequently assumed the title and responsibilities of Queen Consort upon Charles's succession at the explicit request of Queen Elizabeth II. In that capacity, she fulfilled public obligations that were frequently associated with her position, with a particular emphasis on humanitarian initiatives and the provision of consistent private support to her spouse. Her philanthropic endeavors and consistent presence were intended to normalize and ameliorate her public image. A portion of the populace never quite embraced her ascension, despite the palace's efforts to normalize her status. For certain observers, each public appearance served as a reminder of the contentious journey that had brought her to the verge of the throne. The impact of Princess Diana's personal tragedy on public perceptions of the monarchy was substantial, as it underscored the importance of emotional accessibility and personal charisma as criteria for royal legitimacy, in addition to traditional ritual and duty. Diana is often referred to as the people's princess, and her legacy continues to be significant. Diana's relatability approach, which involved her willingness to engage with the public through empathetic engagement, revolutionized the standards for a successful royal. These standards have endured for a generation that has grown accustomed to televised spectacle and social media narratives as the primary forms of political and cultural interaction. The prominence of Queen Camilla's children, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes, was given inordinate significance in this enduring context. They are not entitled to royal status or inherited titles, as they are the offspring of Camilla's initial union with Andrew Parker Bowles. However, they have gradually integrated into the social and ceremonial realm of the royal family as relatives of the Queen Consort. On a personal level, their attendance at significant events, including the coronation and other conspicuous state functions, as well as their participation in private family gatherings, was justifiable. Family members frequently participate in significant milestones. Nevertheless, the Parker Bowles family's gradual integration into official affairs began to blur the distinction between the sovereign's biological family and the family that enters through marriage, which was a source of concern for traditionalists within and around the royal institution. This ambiguity has caused a growing sense of unease among senior royals who are particularly concerned with the preservation of the Windsor lineage and the preservation of Princess Diana's legacy, according to analysts and insiders. Prince William, who is distinguished for his dedication to preserving his mother's legacy, is purported to have watched these events with growing anxiety. A parallel, quasi-official, familial structure was emerging within the court, which was a source of concern regardless of whether it was based on concrete acts or perceived trends. The constitutional norm that regal authority and ceremonial precedents predominantly arise from hereditary succession would be potentially compromised by the system's intimacy to power, which would be derived not from lineage, but from marriage connections and the king's personal preferences. The institutional concern is related to precedent, the maintenance of the clear structure of inherited order that supports ceremonial operations and public image becomes increasingly challenging as social closeness establishes unofficial channels of influence. The Parker Bowles siblings have primarily maintained a degree of distance from formal royal affairs. Each has initiated a private career. Mr. and Mrs. Lopes is a curator and arts professional who is involved in creative domains, while Parker Bowles is a cuisine writer, critic, and presenter. Nevertheless, their participation in significant royal banquets, church services, and familial gatherings increased as a result of their mother's appointment as Queen Consort. According to individuals who are knowledgeable about regal decorum, the frequent attendance of non-hereditary family members at ceremonies that are entrenched in centuries of tradition has led to both aesthetic and procedural complications. Traditionalists have expressed concern about the integrity of these practices in light of the significant presence of individuals who lack formal rank but have a personal connection to the monarch. Protocol necessitates a meticulous arrangement of seating precedents and representation of the crown during official events. The institution's perceived distribution of honor and legitimacy may be substantially impacted by minor modifications to seating arrangements or representative lists. Subtle signs of discord began to emerge. Palace staff discreetly conjectured that remarks had been made suggesting an anticipation by some individuals of a more significant future role for Camilla's descendants. Unverified accounts emerged of a private moment of discord between Laura Lopes and the Princess of Wales Catherine. The Prince and Princess of Wales, as reported by certain insiders, led a subtle yet evident opposition to those indications. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, whose roles epitomize the hereditary continuity fundamental to the monarchy, have been the primary focus of William and Catherine's efforts to preserve a clear and indisputable line of succession. In public narratives of their private deliberations, the couple's emphasis on guaranteeing a constitutional future for their offspring has consistently been evident. These private challenges were exacerbated by the changing public perceptions. The Parker-Bowles family's increased prominence prompted internet forums and media commentators to question the legitimacy of non-hereditary family members in prominent positions in governmental affairs. The objection was not primarily personal animosity toward Tom Parker-Bowles or Laura Lopes. Rather, it was rooted in principle. The British monarchy's legitimacy has historically been predicated on the hereditary principle, which posits that the crown and ceremonial precedents are passed down through bloodlines and legal descent. Some perceived the purportedly discreet endeavor to incorporate a family lineage that was devoid of inherited entitlement, even at a social level, as a compromise of that fundamental principle. The issue was perceived by numerous analysts as a matter of preserving the constitutional integrity and impartiality of the sovereign institution, rather than expressing animosity toward individuals. King Charles was burdened by conflicting obligations in the private sector. For years, it has been stated that he has prioritized the preservation of familial bonds and home harmony, publicly advocating for his wife and refraining from institutional disputes regarding household composition. Camilla, in turn, demonstrated clear loyalty, which was accompanied by numerous public demonstrations of reciprocal respect. Nevertheless, the fundamental issue of the Parker-Bowles family's position within the formal structure of the monarchy was not addressed, and it was allowed to persist rather than being directly challenged. As informed sources have indicated, the current edict is the consequence of the emergence of a catalyst and the escalating discontent which required a firm response rather than continued forbearance. The impetus, as reported by individuals within the royal circle, was not an isolated event, but rather the discovery of a letter written by Diana, Princess of Wales, that had previously been undiscovered. Princess Anne supervised the recent reorganization of the personal archives of the late Queen Elizabeth II at Windsor Castle, during which the letter was reportedly discovered. The management of the personal documents of the deceased monarch is frequently a meticulous and judicious endeavor. Archive activities conducted in secluded environments frequently disclose items of significant historical and emotional significance. A sealed box contained private correspondence that was specifically addressed to the Prince of Wales at the time. The contents of the letter were subsequently described as a combination of maternal appeal and grave admonition regarding the future stewardship of the monarchy by those who have viewed or recounted it. The letter, which was sent during a time of significant emotional turmoil and clarity, reportedly urged Charles to prioritize the integrity of the royal lineage over other concerns. Diana is said to have expressed apprehensions, without naming any specific individuals, that certain entities may undermine the Windsor heritage and endanger the birthright of her sons William and Harry. She allegedly cautioned against external ambition and underscored the necessity of taking measures to ensure that the monarchy's destiny is preserved for those who were born into it, rather than those who may intrude upon it through personal relationships or marriage connections. This framing, which is a warning conveyed through maternal concern, appears to resonate profoundly with a significant number of individuals who subsequently read the letter, particularly due to the enduring cultural significance of Diana's comments. The most poignant remark, as reported, envisioned a prospective future in which William may have a daughter. Diana conveyed a fervent desire for the child's position in the succession and in the nation's regard to be meticulously safeguarded. The wording of the letter was remarkably prophetic to subsequent recipients. Some perceived it as an implicit allusion to Princess Charlotte, who has achieved a unique emotive and symbolic status in the public's consciousness. Princess Anne was profoundly affected upon unearthing and reading this missive, according to accounts. She reportedly insisted on presenting it privately to the king, acknowledging its personal significance and potential constitutional implications. Princess Anne's involvement is noteworthy due to her enduring reputation for unwavering fidelity. Her actions convinced insiders that the document was more than a mere artifact. In their view, it was a catalyst for deliberate action. Close associates described Charles's encounter with Diana's remarks as transformative decades later. The letter rekindled a series of commitments and a unique emotional resonance that were linked to the recollections and desires of his first wife. The excerpt that referenced a future grandchild was perceived as a moral imperative and for many an almost sacrosanct obligation. It was not only personal advice but a command that required action to fulfill Diana's request. According to those narratives, the repressed emotions of humiliation and unresolved sorrow appear to have been transformed into a resolute determination to fulfill the letter's requests. As a result, the king's actions are perceived by his allies and certain insiders as an effort to honor a commitment to his deceased wife and to protect the succession as Diana had urged. Princess Charlotte's function as a public figure and symbolic focal point is essential to this narrative. Charlotte has frequently drawn comparisons to her deceased great-grandmother, Diana and Queen Elizabeth II, since infancy, with observers noting her tranquil public demeanor, which is indicative of previous generations. Her attendance at royal events attracts substantial public interest. Photographs and brief videos of her are widely shared on social media, underscoring her status as a figure of significance, not only in terms of genealogy, but also as an emotional foundation for the institution. The monarchy's aspiration to exemplify both modernity and continuity is encapsulated by Charlotte's comportment and the public's veneration for her, according to certain observers. Princess Charlotte's significance surpasses her position in the succession line. She is a symbol of continuity, serving as an intergenerational conduit that connects the ritualistic stability of the Windsor family with the historical values of empathy and compassion as demonstrated by Diana. She represents optimism for a future in which the monarchy maintains significance through its constitutional role and emotive connection to numerous members of the public and palace officials. Charlotte's cultural and symbolic significance has established her as a formidable figure in the discussions regarding the monarchy's future, despite the fact that it was unintentional. The protection of Charlotte's symbolic significance extends beyond familial concerns, transforming into a strategic conviction that the preservation of emotional legitimacy is as critical as the preservation of legal supremacy. The seamless popularity of a child reminiscent of the monarch she successfully supplanted has elicited conflicting emotions for monarch Camilla, who has dedicated decades to establishing a public image and resolving the psychological repercussions of her past vilification. In the worst-case scenario, this dynamic produced an uncomfortable emotional contrast to Camilla's efforts to accept. In the worst-case scenario, it exacerbated latent tensions regarding competing sources of public affection within the family. This is the opinion of some observers. Camilla's extensive process of reinvention was founded on the conviction that public trust would be earned through consistent service and discretion. Consequently, any suggestion that specific members of her family may be separated by formal decree is interpreted as a significant personal rejection, in addition to an institutional reassessment. From this standpoint, the King's proclamation may be interpreted as a proactive institutional strategy intended to protect Charlotte's, and by extension, her siblings' future dominance. The sovereign allegedly sought to prevent any potential influence or ambiguity regarding the unequivocal status of the direct successors by establishing a formal, irrevocable separation between the Queen Consort's extended family and the Crown's official structure. In this interpretation, Charles's actions were equally concerned with safeguarding the direct line George, Charlotte, and Louis from any ambiguities and encroachments as they were with maintaining the abstract concept of hereditary succession. The action appears to be an attempt to eradicate constitutional ambiguity by explicitly and legally defining who is a member of the inner circle that acquires status through lineage. Reports indicate that the decree was signed with legal precision and solemnity. The document, which was written in formal language, explicitly stated that individuals who were not in the direct line of succession would not possess any title, official, honorific, or ceremonial function associated with the crown. The environment at Buckingham Palace was characterized by constraint. Essentially, the objective was to eradicate any quasi-royal status that the Parker-Bowles family may have acquired through social closeness rather than birthright. The legal mechanisms of such an instrument can be complex. The Crown has historically exercised authority over styles and titles through instruments such as letters patent and normative conventions regarding roles and representational duties are largely dependent on the discretion of successive sovereigns and their advisors. The measure's implementation necessitated confidentiality. It is alleged that the King, Prince William, and Princess Anne have formed a close private group to finalize the decision prior to its public disclosure. The objective of this restricted approach, according to insiders, was to prevent last-minute appeals or internal discussions that could have altered or postponed the outcome. During periods of constitutional reconfiguration, the monarchy's operational strategy typically involves strategic confidentiality. The institution endeavors to provide a cohesive and meticulously crafted narrative to the public and government officials by resolving issues internally in advance of the need for an announcement. After the edict had been ratified and authenticated, Queen Camilla was summoned to the palace. According to eyewitness accounts, she was unaware of the precise cause for the emergency summons and was presented with a situation that was already predetermined. Camilla perceived the disclosure as a significant personal setback as it was communicated in a formal but composed manner. She promptly departed the palace in a state of turmoil, as reports indicate that she was profoundly astounded and extremely distressed. The portrayal of the Queen Consort's departure in this manner created a striking image of a woman whose private life had been profoundly and publicly disrupted by the monarch with whom she had pursued a public alliance for decades. The perspective of a Queen Consort who has been divested of the informal advantages her family previously enjoyed is politically significant and emotionally impactful. In the hours that followed, the King and Queen engaged in a private and emotionally charged confrontation. The interaction is perceived by those who are familiar with it as an outburst of long-repressed grievances rather than a rational discourse. Camilla allegedly accused the king of treachery, arguing that the edict undermined the years of loyalty and the substantial burden of public censure she had endured on his behalf. She is purported to have described the action as a profound visceral rejection rather than an abstract institutional necessity. The conversation's accounts illustrate the intersection of the pragmatic operations of statecraft with the unrefined language of human relationships, which results in the monarchy being consistently dramatic. This intersection is characterized by anguish, fury, and the language of human relationships. This breach, according to the same reports, shifted Camilla's reaction from astonishment to defiance. According to acquaintances, she expressed a willingness to disclose information that could be detrimental to the king and the institution as a whole, thereby threatening retaliation, whether explicitly or implicitly. She is purportedly in possession of confidential information, including correspondence and memories that, if disclosed, could be humiliating or destabilizing as a result of her protracted association with regal life. However, the potential for a public conflict caused by conflicting disclosures of private information considerably increases the stakes. The existence of such materials that may influence public narratives, or if their suggestion functions as a negotiation strategy, remains equivocal. The royal family is purportedly on high alert as a result of this possibility. According to reports, the palace's crisis teams, which consist of legal advisors, communications experts, and senior assistants, are prepared for the possibility of a protracted public conflict. Several reports were published in specific European media outlets shortly after the decree, which referenced anonymous sources and ambiguous accusations regarding the king's behavior. Some palace analysts have interpreted these narratives as the initial phases of a potentially prolonged conflict, which may have been conducted in part through strategically timed disclosures. Contemporary communication tools have exacerbated the impact of the strategic deployment of information or deception, which has always been a critical component of the dynamics of sovereign crises. It is challenging to anticipate the long-term consequences of such an internal compromise. The monarchy's contemporary framework has been redefined by the king's conduct in a single decisive maneuver. On the one hand, it appears to have institutionally resolved the issue of the queen consort's family's official status, thereby eliminating a source of persistent procedural and symbolic ambiguity. In contrast, it has generated novel, unanticipated risk factors, particularly the possibility of a public and deeply personal catastrophe that could significantly damage the monarchy's reputation, in addition to the existing uncertainties. The ultimate result will be contingent upon the progression of events over the next few weeks and years, including the resolve of complaints, the restoration of communication channels, and the public's growing interest in a sustained, profoundly intimate drama involving the royal family. Despite this upheaval, the Prince and Princess of Wales have been depicted by numerous pundits as symbols of continuity and stability. The straight line of succession has become the primary focus of both official and popular attention, as the Camilla question appears to have been resolved in institutional terms. William and Catherine are now widely recognized as the primary public representatives of the monarchy's contemporary incarnation. Their approach, which is characterized by a combination of traditional obligation, improved accessibility, and a distinct emphasis on familial life, appears to be establishing the foundation for the institution's future external behavior. However, certain observers argue that the current crisis, despite its distress, may have facilitated the transfer of genuine influence to the next generation, both in rhetorical and practical contexts within the household. The public's reaction to the narrative that has been extensively disseminated has been significantly divided despite the palace's reticence. The decision has been praised by a segment of the public as well as analysts who agree with the king's reasoning as a necessary act of fortitude. This belated measure is intended to commemorate Princess Diana's legacy and protect the integrity of the royal line. The phrase, "he finally did it for Diana," has been widespread on social media and in opinion articles among those who viewed the action as a reaffirmation of principle. This action resolves a disquieting uncertainty and bolsters the institutional constraints that underpin the monarchy's legitimacy with respect to this demographic. Conversely, a substantial portion of the generation has condemned the action as insensitive and autocratic. Critics express sympathy for Queen Camilla, who has devoted more than 2 decades to public service for the crown, and for her children who are now officially disavowed of their informal status and affiliation. This section argues that the king's decision places a strict interpretation of genealogy above empathy and familial allegiance. They inquire whether an organization that is founded on devotion and responsibility should hurriedly impose a family consequence that publicly stigmatizes individuals who have not pursued public office or asserted regal status. Princess Charlotte is largely unaffected by political discourse, despite the fact that these divided reactions are present. Recent events appear to have increased her symbolic significance. She is now perceived as the emotional and dynastic core around which the institution's future may be consolidated. The significant expectations surrounding Charlotte may eventually become a liability, as observers suggest. The ethical and practical concerns about privacy and the public demands imposed on royal family members are a result of safeguarding a child as a symbolic asset. Queen Camilla has allegedly chosen to maintain a low profile in the weeks following the edict, avoiding public appearances as a deliberate strategy. Reports suggest that her children are pursuing legal counsel to determine whether any aspect of the decree is subject to challenge. Individuals in her inner circle suggest that she is painstakingly evaluating her alternatives. Legal professionals suggest that the likelihood of a direct legal challenge to the sovereign's decisions being successful in the courts is low, given the monarch's uncommon constitutional status and the distinctive legal privileges associated with the crown. Nevertheless, the palace's media staff would be compelled to develop strategies to mitigate any reputational damage, as the commencement of judicial procedures would generate a substantial constitutional and political spectacle. This situation is significantly influenced by the broader constitutional framework. Prerogative powers that have been traditionally held by the crown are applied in practice based on ministerial advice, as the United Kingdom's unwritten constitution heavily relies on conventions and laws. The sovereign's interventions regarding titles and representative functions are rare and frequently occur with the sanction of the extended family, the Prime Minister, or other prominent constitutional figures. The issue could evolve into a national constitutional discourse rather than remaining an internal familial conflict if public dissent were to extend beyond the household, such as if government officials were prompted to express their views, or if Parliament members felt obligated to discuss the wider ramifications for the Crown. This escalation would present the monarchy with a challenge in navigating the intricate relationship between public responsibility and private privilege. For example, while the sovereign has the theoretical authority to regulate styles and titles, historically instruments such as letters patent have been used to establish precedents and confer ranks. Practically any modification that affects matters acknowledged across the Commonwealth realms may require consultation with governments that recognize the monarch as their head of state. Despite the fact that the king's edict is primarily ceremonial and internal, the public spectacle of a sovereign publicly separating a consort's family from court life may prompt inquiries in other domains regarding the nature of royal decision-making and the mechanisms by which it is executed. Ministers and constitutional advisors may be hesitant to publicly discuss what the palace regards as a private familial matter. However, the potential reputational repercussions could render silence politically detrimental. King Charles is confronted with a formidable challenge. Nevertheless, the personal impact is evident as he has unambiguously exercised his authority. In private acquaintances portray a man who has been profoundly affected by the schism his decision has caused. He is certain of the institutional necessity of the rift, but he is distraught by its personal implications. He has successfully achieved the institutional objective that he was purportedly pursuing. However, this has led to a personal and familial schism that may have unforeseeable and long-lasting results. The historical narrative of the monarchy suggests that institutional durability is frequently contingent upon the family's capacity to endure internal crises and publicly reaffirm cohesion rather than explicit regulations. The potential for reestablishing unity in this context has not yet been established. Throughout its extensive history, the British monarchy has persevered through numerous crises, balancing the demands of a contemporary constitutional function with the traditions of the past. This has been achieved by navigating scandals and changes. This issue, which is rooted in the themes of love, legacy, responsibility, and treachery, has the potential to become one of the most defining of the current era. It complicates every conceivable conclusion by interweaving personal suffering with national significance. The sovereign has implemented measures to protect the legal and ceremonial boundaries of succession. However, the family that currently represents and oversees those boundaries appears to be fragmented in a manner that could potentially jeopardize the institution's longevity in the years ahead. In official terms, the crown remains unaltered. However, the family that interprets and upholds it possesses new wounds that necessitate time, caution, and potentially personal as well as institutional compromises to facilitate healing. The subsequent developments will be contingent upon a variety of factors, including the potential for private reconciliation, the realization of any menacing revelations, the initiation of legal action, and most importantly, the reactions of the public and the political establishment of the United Kingdom. A recognizable trajectory is frequently observed in royal crises: public indignation or intrigue, institutional withdrawal, a period of silent deliberation, and ultimately a controlled return to normalcy. The narrative may not adhere to a conventional script, as the distinctiveness of this moment is inextricably linked to the memory of Diana and inquiries over who represents the crown's emotional legitimacy. There are genuine human interests that extend beyond the headlines and speculation. A sovereign who has dedicated himself to the protection of an institution to which he has dedicated himself has undertaken what he deems essential to address a complex history. A queen consort who is attempting to restore her reputation is confronted with what she perceives as a degrading personal setback. A younger generation, exemplified by Princess Charlotte, has emerged as an unexpected, emblematic focal point of a national discourse. Individuals who were previously unaccustomed to public scrutiny are now ensnared in a constitutional crisis. Each actor will continue to make real-time decisions, each of which will have an impact on the narrative that history will ultimately document. In order for the monarchy to emerge intact from this crisis, it will be necessary to extract lessons from both pragmatic and ethical perspectives. It may be necessary for the household to reevaluate its management of the involvement of non-hereditary relatives in ceremonial life, and to clarify the procedures for determining and communicating this status. The potential for ad hoc social closeness to be misinterpreted as constitutional authority can be mitigated by establishing protocols and transparency regarding the criteria for inviting individuals to represent the crown, the allocation of patronages, and the determination of precedence. The relationship between public obligation and private empathy, the institutional necessity for definitive regulations, and the personal burden those regulations may impose on individuals who, despite their association with the royal household, are not directly in the line of succession, will be the subject of increased ethical scrutiny. Additionally, this episode will serve as an incentive for viewers to reflect on the enduring influence of Diana's legacy. Her life and legacy continue to influence public perceptions of the qualities of royal family members, including their sensitivity to common hardships, compassion, and approachability. The capacity of the deceased to exert moral and political influence long after their death is underscored by the disclosure of a letter purportedly composed by Diana and the substantial influence it has had on high-level decision-making. The king's conduct will be perceived as a transgression that compromised personal allegiance for symbolic commitment by some, while others will interpret it as an expression of filial devotion. A single reality is evident regardless of the dominant viewpoint. The institution must simultaneously manage the immediate consequences and guarantee that the long-term narrative is consistent with public acceptable ideals. Popular legitimacy is not equivalent to the legal security of the crown. The monarchy's longevity will be determined by its ability to repair familial fractures in a manner that restores public faith in a time when symbolic capital is as significant as formal authority. The royal family's ability to reconcile in a manner that preserves its institutional integrity and the compassionate connections that sustain it will be determined by the upcoming months, which will be marked by both public and private conversations, potential legal strategies, and increased media scrutiny. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, and share it.